Hello, I'm Brad Kelly, and you're listening to Method and Madness. This is a show about books, the people who write them, and the labyrinth to be explored between the words.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had his bad. Listen while I tell you about a dream.
I'm joined today by Frank Kidd. He is the co-host of the Frank and Brady podcast, where he and his co-host Brady Putsky, am I saying that right?
It's actually Puchka. I messed it up in our
Puchka.
first episode.
Is that right? Okay. And the two of them and sometimes guests dive into a pretty diverse range of movies and books, including recent episodes on Robert Heinlein's The Sixth Column and Vanilla Sky. He is the writer of numerous short stories and reviews on his Pulp West Substack, which we're going to talk about a little bit. And he is the author of Medicine Woman, an action-packed Western/frontier/adventure/romance, displaying the finest of the pulp tradition. So first of all, Frank, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure. We're surviving. We're just talking offline. We're surviving the great blizzard or whatever this is of 2026. I really enjoyed Medicine Woman quite a lot. I mean, it's a page turner and it's everything that's advertised on the tin. It's, we've got our strong, competent, freedom-loving protagonist, Levi. He's quick with a weapon, but, ultimately has a heart, which I think kind of keeps us engaged with the story throughout. We've got really tense action scenes. There's betrayals, there's chaotic hunts, bloody battles, frontier espionage, and all with a bit of native mysticism thrown in as well. So people listening, if that sounds appealing to you, definitely find the link in the show notes and pick up a copy of this book. Frank, I guess so kind of first question about this, and I've got a bunch of questions for you about Medicine Woman and the writing process, but I like to kind of start with this question when I have writers on because I find it interesting. What was the first, whether it was image or concept or character or whatever, what was the first thing that started the writing process of Medicine Woman?
Oh, weird. That's a good question. This is actually kind of funny. So I was actually cruising book cover zone, looking at like Western book covers, and I found this sweet book cover, and I was like, I bought it. I didn't even end up using it, but I was like, I'm gonna write something for this cover, and yeah, I don't recommend doing that, but but it worked out. And then that kind of became the impetus for Medicine Woman. I've also always been a big fan of Jeremiah Johnson.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, and I think I just finished Crow Killer around that time. So, I don't know. It kind of.
What's Crow Killer? I know Jeremiah Johnson. But what's Crow Killer?
Yeah. So Crow Killer is kind of like it's like the book that inspired John Milius to write Jeremiah Johnson.
Oh,
it's about liberating Johnson.
Yeah.
The movie's a little bit toned down because like the guy was in a feud with the Crows, and he would like literally cut their liver out and eat it after everyone. yeah, and like the book, like kind of by the end of it, you're kind of like bought in. Like you forget that like he's half cannibalistic. I don't know. It's pretty cool.
Right. I could see him toning that down though. That's a little much for like a 1970 Robert Redford vehicle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's like a little too far. I mean, it's cool, but yeah.
I think it was actually in the script, but that got shot down by the studio.
Wow. No big surprise. It's funny. You look back at some of those classic movies. I was just watching yesterday. I was watching Escape from Alcatraz, and it's like,
ooh,
it's a great movie. Nice. That movie's rated PG, and like, you don't think about that. Like, if you were going to make
not a PG movie.
Yeah, if you were going to make a prison escape movie now, it would be hard R, lots of swearing. Right. There'd be a lot there. It's a great story. The Escape from Alcatraz film is as good as it gets for that kind of movie. The performances are all great, the story's great. But yeah, if you made it now, it would be like gratuitous violence, which probably should be if you're setting a film in a maximum security prison, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it does
It's
feel a
funny
little.
how they get away with it though back then, like, because
Yeah,
it's still a great movie. You don't really miss it.
you don't.
You know, yeah. So
Yeah,
it's weird.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
still very adult though.
For sure. Yeah, I think a kid
Yeah.
watching it would be very confusing. Anyway. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to know a little bit more. I mean, I've read Medicine Woman, and I've been kind of picking through your Substack and stuff, and listening to Frank and Brady. But I wanted to get a little bit more on your sort of writing background. Like, Medicine Woman, I think this is your only novel that you've got out there, but you've got a ton of short stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is, how would you describe like your relationship to writing, like sort of when it started, and how would you describe like your process of learning to write and getting better at it?
Yeah, no, totally. I kind of came to writing in a weird way. I was writing like almost blog articles for a job when I was in the military, and then that kind of like I don't know. I got the bug to write in me from that. Like I really like fell in love with writing. And then, I grew up on a farm, like lots of manual labor. I was always telling myself stories and coming up with stories, like, you know, doing chores or like even working in the field for 8 hours or on the tractor.
Yeah.
And so like, I've always had that impulse to write a story, write a book, movies. And then, yeah, about 5 years ago, I think it finally clicked that was something I could just do and dedicate, a couple hours every day to. And then I was also unemployed for about 3 months, and that's when I picked it up. And
Okay, yeah.
so like every morning I would get up and write for like 4 hours.
Awesome.
Great way to pass unemployment.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It's cheap too. It just
Yeah.
yeah.
And I had like no idea. That was my first trunk novel basically came
Wow.
about then. I was just like stumbling through writing a novel, teaching myself, reading craft books, craft blogs. And yeah, that like those like 2-3 months of just solid practice and habit building just snowballed into where we're at now, where
Yeah.
I basically
Yeah,
can't
no, that makes sense.
not write.
That's great. Yeah, that
Yeah.
it's one interesting thing about having sort of manual labor jobs, and I've done a little bit of it, but it's been a while. But it's interesting because if it's not too demanding of your problem solving sort of abilities, you actually do end up with like a lot of time to think. Weirdly enough,
Yes.
but
Yes.
the difficult thing is then to like do anything with that, because by the time you're done with your workday, you're like exhausted,
Yeah.
and you don't necessarily have the juice in you to actually like turn that thinking into something. But man, I know
Right.
I've spent hours. I had a job for a while where I was taking care of boats, and I just buff out a boat all day long. It's incredibly monotonous, and I was
Yes.
just all day long. I had a whole thing in
But
my
you learn
head.
how to like entertain yourself,
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
it ends up being more awesome. Like I've made the point that like these laptop jobs, what I have now, that take up like 60% of your brain power. So it's like I would much rather almost buff out a boat and
Right.
just disappear into
I
Fantasyland than
I know if
do
it
that job.
paid the same. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
yeah, for real. No, I'm totally with you on that. Interesting. So, let's talk a little bit more about Medicine Woman. First of all, who is Levi, and sort of where does he come from as a creation?
Yeah, he's kind of an amalgamation of Jeremiah Johnson, and then like every Louis Lamar character that's kind of I've ever read. A little bit of my own twist. I also dislike. I wanted to write someone who's a little bit more Homeric in morality than I feel like. I feel like you get a lot of these like old these historical fiction characters who have a 21st century ethics. You know, it's kind of
Yeah.
a liberal ethics, classically liberal ethics, which is
Right.
just I find really not. It pulls me out of the
Yeah,
fictive dream. You know.
it's super anachronistic. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like yeah, I've
Yeah.
I've come across this in film, maybe not so much in stuff I've read, but definitely in like shows and movies I've seen where it's like there's no way that that guy thinks like that.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, but the sort of modern paradigm is like, well, he can't be, he can't. He has to be a good guy, so he has to be a good guy by like this narrowly defined modern
Yes.
interpretation of what a quote unquote good guy is. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Well, yeah, and you see that stuff too. And there's funny. It's funny too where this happens with sort of like bad guys too, villains, where it's like
Yeah.
if you make a villain, for instance, you make a villain racist, then that has to be the entire story, right?
Right. Yeah.
They can't
That
just
can't
be
just be
like,
a characteristic. That's his
right.
lesson he has to like learn or pay for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really weird. It's really weird. So then what ends up
Yeah.
happening is so that they don't run into that problem, sometimes you'll see it they'll like it'll almost be indirectly sort of implied that they're not, but then you're like, but he's a bad guy, so can't he like it doesn't it turns you into these like mental morality gymnastic
Yeah.
things that are like you say, it's take you out of the story for sure. Yeah.
Well,
And you know, in this book, it's clear that you've done a lot of research. Now, I can't verify a lot of this stuff because I'm not that embedded in this like historical
yeah.
milieu for sure, but I can tell that you have done a lot of, I don't know where you've picked it up, and I guess that's my question. Tell me about the research process for this. How much of it did you kind of already know going into it, and how much of it did you have to figure out along the way?
I knew a fair amount of it just because I've spent my whole life reading and watching westerns. I did pick up a few books, like nonfiction books on the Blackfeet Indians, just to try and sink myself into that world. That's kind of where I got like I learned how they rated for horses because it's like a whole process that you don't really think about, and that ended up becoming like several chapters worth of plot, you
Yeah.
know, to bake in the action. The other thing I read was there's you can find these old memoirs or autobiographies written by these guys, and so you can kind of like you can pick up a lot of like cool anecdotes that are very true to the time that you wouldn't even think of like how they do that, and so I cribbed those sometimes, you know. I'm trying to think. Like there's a scene where Levi wraps his horse's hooves in moccasins,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically like in deer leather to muffle the hoof beats, and that's cribbed right out of, you know, one of those memoir
cool.
autobiographies from back then. So it's you can pick up a lot of cool shit from like the firsthand accounts, basically.
Yeah, no, that makes sense absolutely as a resource for going to that. And that's
Yeah.
something you won't pick, you won't get something like that from reading a book on like the history of an area or what necessarily you wouldn't get that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really good. I mean, we're sort of lucky as writers now. I feel like doing the research is easier than it has ever been, right?
It's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm writing something set in 1934 in Detroit, near where I'm at, right? And I was like, well, I wonder what I can see about on YouTube. I wonder if there's anything. And then, like, next thing
Right.
I know, I'm watching like early movie making from the year my book is set in the neighborhood, driving down the street. I'm like, how is this? It's just happenstance, you know? And so now all of a sudden I got the actual businesses that are there and all of this. And you can find so much stuff like that as long as you
Yeah.
get a little savvy with your Googling and you know some of the sites to go to and stuff like that. Yeah.
Well, and that's where like AI I found super helpful, especially Grok,
Yeah.
because it'll include the references on deep search. So you can
Yes.
you can drag up these like old blogs and old news articles from 20 years ago that you could never find on the front page of Google.
Right. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I've found myself veering in that direction too, and making use of
Yeah.
that. You can ask very specific questions and get answers to them. And, you want to find the right answer, but then there's also like, on a certain level, it's like, well, if this isn't right, nobody's going to be able to find a more right answer. So, I'm probably,
I
I'm
play
probably
that game
close
too.
at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Or sometimes there's things where you're like, this is anachronistic, but I kind of need it
Yeah.
for the story, so I'm going to fudge the lines there.
Yeah, that's what this
It's
is.
like, I hope
yeah.
nobody thinks too much.
Right. This is what I was going to ask you next, is like, how important is historical accuracy to you? Like I said, this book seems historically accurate as far as I can tell, but like, how
Yeah.
important is that to you?
It is only as important as being able to like create enough of an illusion that it's historically accurate for me, if that makes sense. Like, I think like Bernard Cornwell or some historical fiction writers get super like autistic with it.
Right.
And I super respect that, but I'm just not that guy. Like, it's kind of like I try and get as much as I need and keep the writing moving, So
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me, because I think you're right. I haven't read him specifically, but I have read other stuff where it's like, this feels like you wanted to get like spurred out about history for a couple years of your life, and then you're like, well, if I write a novel about it, I guess that's like an excuse to like
Right.
to do the research instead of sort of the other way around, do the research so that you can write the book, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much I had a writing teacher, sort of mentor at one point, and I was trying to write, and I don't generally write historical stuff, but here and there I've written something set in a specific time period. And I was asking this mentor of mine, who had also written some stuff set, I don't know, in the 1800s or whatever. And I was asking him about research, and he said, just write the thing first and then research afterwards to like clean it up. And it's like,
Yeah, I don't hate that. I find like I can research, get the first draft down, kind of research as I get the first draft down, but then there'll still be like weird gaps.
Right.
And then I'll like kind of keep researching as I put it on ice, and then you can come back and brush up,
right.
Plot points or scenes or add stuff that you find. And it still works because you like laid the structure down.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I totally think that's a thing.
Yeah, I think you need to do a little bit ahead of time, just because then you at least know, I don't know, like some of the stuff that you want to happen in this story is going to kind of come out of the research. Like you're saying, you read an anecdote and you're like, oh shit, that needs to go in the book someplace.
Right.
And if you come across that too late in the process, it's like, then you're going to have to like shoehorn it in or make huge changes, which is okay. But yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of more
I think,
annoying.
yeah, I think doing the research probably a little bit heavier on the back, though, does prevent you from having to read everything. It's like,
Yeah,
because like otherwise, where do you know how do you know where to start, where to stop on all of that?
because then you're like more looking for specific answers, if you because you already know the scenes and where it's headed, so you don't need as wide of a net, I guess.
Yeah.
To catch what you need.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, you've got a lot of short stories on your Substack, Pulp West, and people should definitely check that out. I've been reading through there, and you've got some great stuff on there. How would you characterize the difference between writing a short story and writing a novel? What do those two processes look like compared to each other?
Yeah. Really, a short story, you should have one emotional effect, that Edgar Allan Poe advice. Whereas like a novel, you're gonna want like 2 or 3 or even 4 throughout the course of it to break it up. So that's probably the biggest difference. And then I don't know, the short stories they move way quicker, obviously, but like that's kind of the challenge sometimes is keeping them contained, especially after you've been writing novels for a while.
Yeah.
Your short stories tend to expand. I've found, like, I can't write flash fiction anymore. Like, sorry.
Yeah.
1,000 words isn't enough. That's
Yeah.
half a scene.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, but yeah, and then you also kind of need you need, like, not a twist, but you need a good ending, a good punchy climax that, like, kind of scratches the intellectual itch, you know. You can't necessarily just end it with, like, a happily ever after
Right.
type of thing. Whereas, like, a novel, you can get away with that because your climaxes are buried in the novel.
Right. And the emotional experience of the reader is so spread out over the course of so
Yeah.
much time that you can get short story ending moments throughout the book, but you can kind of
Yeah.
end it. Yeah. No, that's very well put. Yeah, there is yeah, I'm with you on flash fiction. I don't find it that interesting really
I
either
don't
to
either.
read it usually. I mean, I guess if there's some insane premise, like it might catch my attention, but yeah, I mean, I just finished something that was like 2,200 words, and that felt really short for me as a story. And it's
Hmm.
like, man, I keep looking back. I'm like, am I missing some obvious thing that this should be doing that it's not? Because it's so short. It's like, it feels like
Right.
it can't possibly be actually be a story if it's this short.
Yeah.
But
I think the only thing it works for, like those short 1,000 word, 3,000 word, is like Raymond Carver or like Bukowski stories. Like,
yeah,
you can get where it's more about the just dropping you into a feeling or a
right.
vibe almost.
Right.
That's
Yeah, it's
that's the only time.
sort of observational. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the shorter you get to, the more, and this doesn't mean when I say this, it doesn't mean it has to be funny necessarily, but it feels like the shorter it gets, the more it should take on the shape of like a joke, sort of.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
like if you get
I was
down to,
actually gonna say that.
yeah,
Yeah.
where it's got this like irony. Yeah, like you said, the twist, there's kind of this irony, but you kind of see it coming sort of in a way,
Yeah,
but
you need a good punchline
mhm,
to, like,
yeah.
tie it all together.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. I think that's very true. So, are you working on a novel now? I don't. When did Medicine Woman come out?
So Medicine Woman came out last year, March
Okay,
3rd.
okay,
I have two other novels written. I'm working to get one out this year, March 3rd. I'm, like, shooting
okay.
for a yearly release.
Nice.
And I like
Yeah,
I like putting them aside for, like, as long as I can, a year or so, cuz when you come back, you can cut out all the cringe. You
yeah,
know, it's, like,
yeah,
super easy to see which
yeah,
darlings you need to kill. But
yeah.
yeah, so I have, like, a military thriller, sea western, as I want to call it, coming out March 3rd. Hopefully, don't hold
Oh,
me to it. It might be
yeah.
April, but
Sure. So wait, so you said sea western, like western on the sea?
yeah,
Okay.
it's basically mercenaries killing, Chinese fishermen off Argentina.
Okay.
So it's it's basically the Wild Bunch, but
Right
a
on.
modern Spec Ops Wild Bunch.
Nice.
I structured it like a western too, so yeah, it's a little bit of a different thing, I
Right.
think.
Right on. Cool. No, that sounds interesting for sure. Well, this leads into a
Yeah.
question I wanted to ask you, and it's a question I have sort of thoughts on, but I find it interesting because I'm interested in what makes a genre, because I think when you start to understand that, it opens you up, particularly as a writer, to make use of that, but as a reader too, to like understand what are the ins and outs of this thing you're reading. To you, what is a western? Like
Yeah.
what makes something a western?
No, genre is, like, one of my pet topics too.
Yeah.
So you stumbled right into what I like to spurg about.
Good. All right, good. Then we're going to spurg out about
Yeah.
it for a bit. Good. Yeah.
Yeah. John Truby's Anatomy of a Genre, great book, by the way, as far as craft books go. Kind of like opened genre up for me. But, so like a Western, you kind of have like two or three types of Westerns. You have Western as a setting. And so you can port like another genre, I would say. I'd say the real definition of genre is like a story's structure, kind of. It has certain conventions. And then the Western's weird because it can also be a setting. So I think that kind of messes people up sometimes. Because you can have a romance book, you can have romance, adventure, but it's in a Western setting.
Right.
And then if you want to talk like just a Western as a genre, I'd say the most basic definition of it is going to be strong horse barbarian defends agrarian types from other strong horse barbarians. I think that's like going to be your most basic Western story, the way most people think about your high noon Western. And like
Right.
almost every TV Western you've ever seen or movie is like some variation of that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And then like Louis L'Amour, a lot of his Westerns are adventure. It's adventure fiction set in the West,
Oh, okay.
which is kind of what makes him different and why I think people love him so much. But I don't think they realize that that's the itch that's getting scratched,
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. Okay. So adventure. I mean, I have an intuition about what this distinction is, but then how do you think about what an if the genre is effectively story structure? What is adventure then?
yeah. So that is a much harder question because I think most people immediately go hero's journey when they hear adventure, and I
Sure.
don't think that like quite fits, especially if you think like swashbucklers, like the Three Musketeers or Count of Monte Cristo. I count those as like adventure fiction, Treasure Island, So that's kind of and then adventure has gotten like lumped in with action now. So it's
Right.
it's kind of like the action genre has taken over adventure and so like that's something I've kind of been wrestling with on my Substack is like what if you were to like try and create what are like the conventions of the adventure genre. I think that's like pretty open to massaging and interpreting, and I think you can create your own genres by repeating conventions. I think you can kind of like hyperstition genres into existence
Oh, I
by
think so. Yeah.
creating the framework that other people can copy essentially. So yeah, I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I wonder too. It's like, so there's the story structure element of it, but is there also thematically something that the Western is handling different than I'll give you, for instance, how I'm thinking about it. Like, I occasionally throw like as almost like a comfort movie. I'll throw like a '90s action movie on, right? As I'm
Yeah.
like folding laundry or something stupid, right? And I like to do the movies I've already seen because it's different. I don't actually have to pay attention to them because I already know what happens and all that, right? If I'm watching something new that I want to see, it's a very different experience. But so I'll throw on, Die Hard. I'll throw on in the background because
Right.
I love that story and I know it beat by beat, right? But I realized watching a bunch of these that there's something going on in the action genre, at least in the film, on film, and I assume in fiction as well, that like the underlying theme of this all seems to be about the virtue of like willpower or the will, right? Because it's always about like
Yeah.
can the hero muster enough will to like overcome this impossible physical
Yeah.
thing, right? And I see that show up in all kinds of places. You can see that show up in a Western for sure, but it seems like, so I start to wonder, you defining Western that way. There's something about though, because the Western has clearly got this like moral element to it, right?
Yeah.
There's clearly like a moral compass to the main character, even if they're kind of a scumbag in a lot of measures. There's like a fundamental decency that sometimes they don't even want to have. It's like reluctant that they're like, oh shit, I got to save this person. I don't want to save this fucking person, but I have to. Yeah, seems to be something that's kind of operating in that territory to me.
I forget who said it, but it was one of the dudes that acted in The Wild Bunch, because that's kind of like the infamous anti-Western.
Yeah.
And he said like, I regret. It was something along the lines of like, I regret ever being in that movie because it was the death of the Western as a morality play, which is pretty interesting. And you're exactly right about the moral element, because it's really the main like moral tension, I think, is how can like a violent man who has to step outside the rules of society for a moment in time to protect the weak or the innocent, then accomplish that, and then also be reintegrated back into society. Usually it's a woman that like, so there's always like a romance subplot in a lot of these Westerns, because she's kind of the path back into society for him.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, especially there's a lot of kind of cool philosophical stuff there. So I just did an episode on Cormac McCarthy's The Crossing, which has Western elements, but is kind of high-minded, I suppose, in a lot of ways. And I love it. But, it goes on to these sort of philosophical side quests, I would say. But, I really got thinking about this question. And the one thing I kind of started to think was, is like the Western sort of writ large, like the story of like America's sort of second founding in a way, right? It's like we had like the revolution, right? And we got Britain off her back, but yet there was still, it wasn't like America was settled at that point. That just got us sort of our own government, our own self-directed autonomy or whatever. But there was still like a lot to do to like turn this into a whole nation. And I kind of started to see this as like, we started telling our story, this Western story about, we tamed the land and it was violent and it was dangerous and it was chaotic. And we put order on it, and we needed these rebellious outlaw types to aid in that process. But ultimately, like you're saying, we ultimately had to integrate them back into society, because because if just the outlaws who sort of settled things are also in charge, then they just become warlords. And
right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Levi, your character Levi, great character. I love reading him. He's super great. But like, if you give him a state to be in charge of, that might not be be the role he's cut out for exactly.
And in a way, he like it kind of breaks that Western convention, right? Because he's like goes full native, I guess, by the end, essentially. So it's kind of a guy that it's different from like your standard Western in that respect, where the arc that he takes is more totally out of civilization to like going, full native.
Yeah. No, and that's that's one thing that I really liked about it. I mean, he kind of starts. Well, he definitely fits like the drifter archetype early on, right? Which is important, and it seems to me to be important in the Western as well. I mean, that's one of your main character types, is the guy who kind of doesn't really belong anywhere necessarily.
Stranger comes to town.
Right, and that's huge. And there's something that deeply appeals, I think, to, I'm assuming other countries as well, but definitely deeply appeals to American men about that archetype, because it's like, there's always this sense that like, well, you could just like give everything up and wander off and then put your life back together on your own wits. That's like, we always like want to think that we would be able to do that, not necessarily like, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it's something that like we still do, right? So like I feel like a lot of a lot of people in other countries, whether it be Europe or whatever, you know, never they have a much tighter bond to home. Whereas like in America, it's very standard to like 18 and you go off to college and you end up in a different state.
Yeah.
You know, that's kind of unique to America culturally.
Yeah.
I think it leads to a lot of disconnection and weirdness, but I do wonder, you know, it's an American archetype
It
at the
is.
end of the day.
Yeah, you go
Yeah.
off and you sort of go off and you make your fortune. And yeah, it used to be, yeah, it used to be
Yeah.
you'd go west and, you know, you'd find gold or start a farm or something. And now it's like
Yeah.
you go get a tech job or you go get a whatever, right?
You go to Silicon
Yeah.
Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different, yeah, the what narratives you can make out of that have different, but that does seem to be part of the American character is yeah, go west and make your fortune, young man, for sure. Yeah, very, very interesting. I wanted to know a little bit more about you've got Pulp West, which is your Substack. It's also, I assume the next books you've got coming out will also have the Pulp West
Yeah.
stamp in print
You
on it,
got one
whatever
of
you
the
want
new
to call it.
copies. Yeah.
Oh, I got one of the new copies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I did something of a rebrand to try and, I don't know, give myself a brand.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
something recognizable, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, the whole, one thing I've learned about this whole, I mean, I just self-published a book, right? Put it out myself, and I've done it before. And you kind of realize over time, like, a big part of this game is, I call it forging imprimatur, which just means not faking, but presenting it as though it's like more professional entity than just you doing something.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's very important
Yeah.
to make it seem that way at first glance. That like, oh, this is part of something. Yeah.
Right. This looks real.
Right.
Yeah.
So no, so I totally appreciate that. But tell me a little bit about the Pulp West sort of in larger terms, in the Substack, the book, the thought, the kind of vision behind it.
Yeah. Pulp is weird because, you know, it's really a word to describe like a material that these old like magazines used to be printed on, this cheap paper. And that's how, you know, that's what pulp is. And so then like fast forward, you know, 100 years, I guess, and we're still using pulp to describe things. And you'll hear like all kinds of different definitions. The way I'm using it is more, I don't know, I'm trying to like key in on an aesthetic, I guess, where it's a little bit less serious than, you know, regular literature or even like a novel.
Right.
And so I don't know, but then like pulp, I feel like sometimes also has a bad rap of being like cheap and trashy, which there's also an element of that trashiness that like attracts me because I like trashy media. Like,
Right. Right.
you know,
Everybody does a little bit. Yeah.
yeah. Like I'm pretty like Spartacus is a great example, the Star Show, where I would say that's like how I'm using pulp, where it's just over the top, but it's still aesthetically nice. It's like its own thing, right? But you know you're gonna get gore and sex and hyper masculine heroes. So I don't know. And then I also think it's funny to try and do things really high quality under that label.
Yes.
I think there's like I think it's surprising to people when they go in with pulp and then stumble on like, oh, this is actually has some like real heart to it as well, you know, and some literary quality. I hope I'm writing
Yeah.
with some literary quality. So yeah, that's kind of that kind of explains the pulp part of that. And then West is because I used to have a quote by me in my bio, which was like, anything can be a Western if you try hard enough. And I do. I'm kind of like keying in on that that genre convention, that structure where like you can port the Western. Like there's an argument that the hard-boiled novels are just Westerns, basically updated.
I think that's true. I think that's the stranger comes to town, ends up on the West Coast. I don't think it's a coincidence that
Yeah.
a lot of the hard-boiled noir stuff started on the West Coast because it was like we ran out of frontier. And then,
Right.
yeah, so there's like this
The city and
backwash.
its underbelly,
Yeah.
became the frontier.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, so there's like a logical progression there to me, in a way.
Yeah.
That I don't know if any of the people who were creating that stuff were thinking about it that way, but yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's helpful, just from a branding exercise, I guess. I don't really want to only write westerns. I have lots of like pulpy sci-fi ideas, which probably aren't commercial, but
Yeah,
that will get
yeah.
written at some
Yeah,
point.
I
But,
mean, you
yeah.
never know. No, the one that I read Spawn on your Substack, which is
Oh
I
yeah,
really enjoyed that. And yeah, that's definitely much more sci-fi. I mean, it's not exactly what I would have expected out of the writer of Medicine Woman, which was cool to see. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I guess that's a cool thing about short stories too, is you can be like, well, you know what, this is what I like about them. So I'm gonna try this thing, and you don't have to
yes,
dedicate 9 months to it or 2 years or whatever. I mean, it takes me 3 or 4 years to write a book, so
yeah.
I have to make sure
Well,
if I'm gonna write a novel, I have to make sure that thing is like worth it, the time and sacrifice.
right.
Yeah, get a little
It's
more
a good,
experimental.
yeah, it's a good place to like try out settings too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, before diving into a novel-long project.
Yeah. Where, if somebody doesn't know you and they want to check out Pulp West, the Substack, because you've got movie reviews and book reviews and a bunch of other stuff in there mixed in with short stories. Do you have
Yeah.
where do you recommend somebody might start? Because it's impressive amount of work you've got on there, but is there some place that you would be like, no, you should start with this story?
No, that's a good question. I don't know. I haven't thought about that before.
Yeah.
I'd say anywhere in the fiction that's up there is a good place to start. Some of it's paywalled, which I don't know. I don't know if it should not be, strategy wise, but I kind of just let it go to the paywall land after
Sure.
a year.
Oh, okay. That's cool. That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think there's a few. Lizard Brains is a story on there, which is kind of like a neo-western noir. I really like that story for whatever reason. It's a bit different.
Cool.
Yeah, I think any of the fiction up there, you'll get a feel. It's quite diverse because I try out different settings, different genres, and some of the stuff that's just a premise, that you don't want to dedicate a novel to, but you want to get the idea out of your head.
Sure.
It's the short story. It's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, no, I mean, part of the reason I wanted you I wanted to have you on was because I got this sense. I wanted to talk to somebody who is like, who is deliberately and sort of consciously interacting with pulp, to be honest, because
Yeah.
I over time have been sort of developing or thinking about this connection between pulp and sort of not only mainstream like American culture, because obviously like there's in a way you can interpret like Marvel cape shit is actually just like high budget pulp in a way.
You're totally right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It really is. And the comic book stuff comes straight out of the pulp tradition,
Yes.
right? It's the same. I think some of it was even printed with like the same equipment probably. And
Yeah.
but there are other sort of tributaries that this thing can go on, right? And I'm sort of fascinated by it because another thing you if you really look at like literary history, particularly in America, you'll find out that like a lot of the American modernist writers like Hemingway, Faulkner, and these types, they were also reading the pulps. They were reading the classics and stuff like that, but they were
Yeah.
also reading the pulps. I mean, Hemingway was influenced by Dashiell Hammett, even though he sort of wouldn't admit to it. And Faulkner's wife was
He
apparently
hated Spillane.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is hilarious.
But I think Hemingway sometimes hated people when they were a little bit too close to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't think it was always
totally.
like genuine. I think it was like a little bit of like, hey man, is this guy stepping on my turf?
Yeah.
And as I was saying, apparently Faulkner's wife was obsessed with H.P. Lovecraft. And
Oh, really?
so he probably ended up reading some Lovecraft along the way, which my whole point is like the high and low is actually interacting a lot more
Yes.
than people I think often think. You go to an English class in college and you're like, well, I'm reading I'm
Right.
reading Faulkner and I'm reading this and I'm reading
Yeah.
that. And you're like, yeah, well, maybe take a look at the huge
Yeah.
volumes of stuff that American writers generated.
Yeah.
And,
The
and the pulp,
lowbrow
yeah, and the
has
pulps,
gold.
right? It absolutely does. Now the pulps, though, in my estimation, were a little less gate kept, so there is maybe a higher proportion of stuff that's not quite worth reading, you know.
Yeah.
But there's great stuff in there. I found recently you can get copies online, obviously, of some of the old Black Mask magazine,
Oh, yeah.
and man, there's some garbage in there, but there's some great stuff in there too by authors who like don't even have Wikipedia. You can't even find anything out about them. You know,
Right.
it's somebody who wrote
Yeah.
4 stories in the 1930s, and they were a dentist or something, and they just yeah, there's just great stuff back there. I feel like I'm interested in a sort of revitalization of it, sort of being conscious of what it is and what it can do. Because to me, it's like
Yeah.
an American, it's not exclusively American, but it almost is. It's like the blues or something that's sort
Yeah.
of an
No.
American genre. American, it's not even genre is not even the right word. An American sort of ethic about how to do this stuff.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. All the way through. Especially with the American ethic, right? It's kind of like old Hollywood. You know, we created movies
Right,
essentially.
right,
Yeah. And so and the pulps are kind of, working in parallel to that where every genre, every movie that you like now, whether it be crime, noir, the superhero comics, that they all interface with that pulp. It was media for the common man at the
right,
end of the day,
right.
right?
Yeah,
So it was like very popular. It was popular media
yeah,
back before you had a TV in every home.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then
oh, go ahead.
no, you're good. Well, I was just gonna say, as far as like the lowbrow and the highbrow talking to each other, you're exactly right. Because like sometimes you'll read stuff and you'll be like, "This is hot garbage,"
Right.
and like I'm writing better than this,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
And then you'll read like a John D. MacDonald book, like just some like throwaway crime fiction, and you're just like, dude, this guy was on another level, but he
yeah.
just didn't want to write like highbrow lit. But
Right.
his prose is beautiful.
Right, right. Yeah, I think that's also like the presumption of the presumption that the highbrow is like I mean sometimes the highbrow stuff is maybe taking on more sophisticated things thematically or whatever. But as I've matured as a writer and working out things that I want to work on and stuff, I really have come to thinking like, man, as a fiction writer, I think a writer, no matter how highfalutin they want to be, if you want to end up writing solenoid or like these crazy 700-page,
Yeah,
stylistic experimentation, and I'm all about that stuff too. But like, as a fiction writer, you could do a lot worse than like, can I write a fairly straightforward plot that is compelling and makes sense? Like,
right.
it's
Yes.
it's way harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
And I come from that MFA, like I got an MFA, I come from that world, and
Mm-hmm.
there are a lot of talented people in that world that would not be able to string a plot together like that.
You're right.
Their
Yes.
brain doesn't
It's
work
a
that
different
way.
skill set.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it totally is a different skill set. And the ability to keep people like turning pages, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can kind of hide behind the highbrow thing by like, oh, you're not smart enough to get it.
Right.
Um,
Right.
right. That's why you DNF'd.
Right.
But like, can you keep someone engaged from page one to the end? That's like it's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
I think.
I think so too. And to me, that's the ultimate test of a book, whether I like a book or not. Is like, do I want to keep flipping the pages? And then you can start
Yeah.
adding stuff on there, like, well, okay, why am I flipping these pages? You know, and some of my favorite books are like art nerd shit for sure, but but they also make me want to turn the page. Like I'm like for whatever
Yes.
reason, I'm trying to figure out how to turn the page, and I think. And I like to bring up some of this stuff because there's a lot of writers of varying levels of experience that listen to this show, and I guess my sort of coming around to the point of it's like, just if you're trying to figure out how to get better at this thing, to me, one thing is how do you just make this thing so people want to flip the page, and you could do a lot worse than turning to like the highest exemplars of the pulp. Whether that's
Yeah.
sci-fi or horror or you know gothic or romance, whatever. There's a ton of stuff to be picked up there.
Have
Yeah,
have you ever read Donald Westlake or
I'm familiar
Lewis
with that
Park
name.
novel?
I have not read any Donald Westlake. I know this is a big blank spot in my.
Dude, every time I pick up a Donald Westlake book, I'm just like, I don't know how he did it because he write they're so perfectly plotted to like keep you, and he also like writes comedies, you know, like crime comedies, which comedy is like a whole different hard thing to do
Yeah.
correctly, but like Donald Westlake is so good at just writing a page turner, and it's like just beautifully structured, perfectly plotted. It's such an insane example of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
That,
yeah.
like he
I'm gonna
should
have
be
to
a
check
part
that
of
out.
every MFA program.
Right. Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will definitely check that out. Yeah. That's one of the things that's interesting about how writing is taught, creative writing. If you go into, and there's pros and cons to even going into such a program or taking classes or workshopping. Right. There's good things about it, bad things about it.
Yeah.
But the one thing that is interesting, it's like we're going to learn how to read, and so or learn how to write, and so we're going to read I'm trying to think of like a good example of we're going to learn how to read Raymond Carver, and I like Raymond Carver, but like
Yeah.
I don't know if you learn that much about how to tell a story necessarily from that by
Right.
itself. It feels like you start in kind of this you kind of start into this like erudite space where we should be like
Yeah.
coloring with the primary colors first and making sure we understand how to do that, and then sort
Yeah.
of, if we want, graduating into, you know, if you want to write something that's a little more, supposedly a little more highbrow, at least at least claiming to be, or you're trying to be, or something like that.
Well, I love that you say like claiming to be highbrow too, because one of I brought up Spartacus earlier, but me and Brady always talk about that show because it's such a good marriage of like lowbrow, essentially pornography. I guess you could definitely make that argument.
Right.
But then you have them like the dialogue is Shakespearean. Like it is the dialogue, and some of it, you know, the story arcs are just straight up Shakespearean and awesome. And so it's
Right.
like this weird thing that, you know, it's art at the end
Yeah.
of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. And a great example of that to me is Jaws, the movie Jaws. Dude, Jaws is smarter than 99% of movies, but it's also just a monster shark movie at the same time,
Yes.
you know? But you
Yeah.
get into that, you know, you get into that great dialogue sort of middle of the book where what's his name is talking about how he was on the, whatever it is, the USS Indianapolis or whatever
Yeah.
it was. You know, like that scene is fucking amazing. Like
Which you know who wrote that?
John Milius
That
wrote
scene-
that over the phone, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but you know, like I'll take that over almost any scene of written dialogue in any movie. It's just powerful
Yes.
and compelling and like kind of and deep at the same time. Like it actually is deep.
Right.
But it's in the middle of this monster movie. And yeah, so yeah, the claiming to be highbrow is sometimes just not is an unwillingness to go hard, in my opinion.
You're
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
That's another great thing about like Michael Crichton novels, right? Is he was doing that. Obviously, a guy with like 140 IQ,
Yeah, yeah,
but he was just writing Pulp Fiction at
yeah,
the end of the day.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I need to revisit some of that stuff. I read all of the Michael Crichton when I was like 13 or something.
Hmm.
I need to like go back and read some of it and see what I think of it now. I'm sure it's good. I just remember being
Yeah,
enthralled
it
by
holds
that
up.
stuff. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about, I guess, America.
Okay.
I know one of the things in your bio is, and we kind of have been, I suppose, but I know one of the things in your bio is amateur historian, and I know Medicine Woman's got like a lot of sort of American history stuff. What and I know you're a guy who served in the military and stuff like that. What do you think is sort of, and maybe you don't have an answer to this. Maybe you'll tell me this is a crazy question, but like, what do you think is missing in our sort of common conception of American history? Because Medicine Woman feels like we're operating in a real time and place that isn't
Hmm.
something people have a good understanding of
Yeah.
or image of. Is there something that like we're missing when we think about the history of America, do you think?
Yeah, I totally do. I think most of our conception of American history is like the American myth. Like everything you're getting taught in social studies class or history class in grade school, even through college, I guess. It whether it's selected for to be learned or not is like kind of based off the value it has to the American myth in a way. Whether it be the founding fathers, the Revolutionary War. You might like barely touch the War of 1812, which
Right.
I don't know why there's not more 1812, fiction.
That's a good point.
Yeah, like even you're gonna talk real heavily about like the Trail of Tears in a very mythologized way, which I read. I think it was called Blood Moon. It's like a nonfiction book about the Cherokee and the Cherokee removal, and then like the settlement in Oklahoma. Because like people don't even really like. There's a gap too where Oklahoma was essentially Indian territory with all these eastern tribes living there, and
Right.
they're like sandwiched in between America, at the time on the East Coast, and the Plains tribes to the west of them, who have like never really interacted with whites at that
Right.
point. And
Right.
like
Right.
half the Cherokee Nation at that point is like mixed breed, uh,
Right.
after removal. So, which also like ends up determining and playing like a huge role in them joining, the Confederacy, because I mean, a lot of them had slaves too.
Oh,
They were
really?
like yeah, they were running like plantations in Indian territory, essentially.
Wow.
Like, that's such a weird, like, you've never heard that. You've never heard that, like, Stan Waddy was a Cherokee chief and a Confederate general.
I haven't heard that. That I'm,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's news
So,
to me.
yeah, and so, like, that's something that, like, when you get up to the Civil War, they might touch on it, they might mention it, but they're not going to really explore it because it's not Grant and Sherman's March and brother against brother and the evils of chattel slavery. So there's just so many there's so many gaps that like you lose in the cracks in service of like telling this American myth.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's like, on the one hand, you can kind of almost understand it because you can't tell everybody, you can't,
yeah,
a history education can't include everything, right? Just
right,
because there's too much. But,
yeah.
and
There's a
so
practicality to it.
right, but then it also, so in sort of making those edits, we also seem to turn it into a fairly convenient narrative
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
like leaves out complications and paradoxes and contradictions that actually
yes,
add color. And I mean, I think about this with like, it's a little bit more contemporary, but it's similar. Like World War II, we have this story, and everybody knows the story, which doesn't is missing a lot of detail.
right,
But like Americans, none of us know shit about World War One, and
yeah,
that's because the story is really, really complicated, and you can't explain
right,
it in like two sentences, right? World War II, you could be like,
yeah,
well, there was this guy Hitler, and he wanted to rule Europe and exterminate the Jews, so we fought them. Okay, well that makes sense, you know. But World
right,
War One is
yes.
like, wait, what happened? Why were these people? You
Who
can't,
who are the villains?
right? I don't. Yeah, it's
They were
very and
villains. Why?
yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. I think there's a lot of things about American history that are like that. Like the War of 1812 is probably similar, where it's a little bit, you almost
Right.
need too much setup to understand it, really. But that doesn't mean it's not
Yeah.
super important and we, shouldn't know more about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Interesting.
mean, it was round two of the Revolutionary War, and just nobody
Right.
like talks about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's probably just as surprising that we won that one as that we won the first revolution, right? I mean, could have gone
Yeah.
either way.
I
Could have gone. Kind of moving on a similar kind of topic, and this is one that's sort of near and dear to my heart. And I'm picking this up from a couple of things that are sprinkled into Medicine Woman. Are the Smokies haunted?
I think so, man. And that might be like my Instagram reel
Yeah.
influencing me, with all the Appalachian haunted skinwalker
Sure.
type things. But I think, dude, there's like definitely something weird about Appalachia,
Yeah.
more than anywhere else, and I don't know what it is. I also find it incredibly weird or cool that it's like it's part of the same mountain range that makes up Scotland and Ireland.
Right.
So you have like Scotch Irish people coming from the Highlands over there, and then literally settling in the same mountain range across the Atlantic. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So,
No.
I,
No,
yeah,
it's like there's something in the land or in the stone or something that is like resonating with these people. It's a very weird connection, and
yeah,
it
there's
is.
like
I
a
mean,
prehistory.
yeah. I don't know how if you have you spent
Time.
much have you spent a lot of time in Appalachia?
No, I
Yeah.
haven't. I've driven through a few times. It's very pretty.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that I would camp there
It's
personally.
yeah. I've spent a fair amount of time there. And I can't say that I've had like any spooky like thing specifically happen, but it does have a different kind of density and like it does have a different vibe than most of the rest of the country, I would say. And there is
Yeah.
like these oddities to it too, there's the Great Dismal Swamp, which is like I haven't been
Oh,
to,
really?
but I'm planning to go there one day because it sounds creepy as hell. And then like there's all these like other like small oddities that don't seem like a big deal, but kind of add to it. Like the Venus flytrap plant comes from like basically this one part of North Carolina, and
Oh,
that's the creepiest plant there is to me. Like,
that's a weird plant to. I didn't even know that was an American plant.
yeah, you assume
Like,
it's like Brazil or something, right?
yeah,
But no, yeah, it comes from It comes from North Carolina, and there's like yeah, and there's a bunch of other things like this too. The legend of the Moon-eyed people comes from there, which I think is mentioned
yeah.
in your book.
Little people, like like all those Indian tribes had little people
Right,
mythologies,
right.
that kind of resembles like fairies.
Right.
Very
Right.
mythology. But
Which, if it's shared mountain range with Scotland, Ireland, there's some
makes sense.
interesting, yeah, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the weirdest things I think about America is like the prehistory of it, right? So like we have 6,000 years of human history across the Atlantic, and then, dude, fucking like you go back 400 years on this continent, and nobody has any idea what was happening.
No.
Like you have like the Aztecs and the Incas, but like it's just anything could happen.
Right.
Like it's
Right.
just very bizarre to me that we're here living with cars and buildings and highways, and then like 150 years ago it was all Stone Age tribes living here. It's
Right.
very
Right.
bizarre if you think about it.
Yeah, yeah, it feels like in a way that like I mean it's sort of tamed. But it does sometimes feel like we did it so fast that we didn't actually
Yeah.
like figure out what it is before we had sort of paved it over and like networked it all
Right.
together. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this on the podcast a couple of times already, so I won't go too into it. But like the whole mound thing, like the mound building culture is
Yeah.
like it feels like we're just starting to figure out what that was,
Yeah.
and even that barely, just how widespread and comprehensive it was, and how the scale of these civic projects, and
Yeah, I actually live down the road from Cahokia, which
oh, do you?
is
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
which is like one of the biggest mound cities.
right,
Right
right,
outside St. Louis, and dude, it's crazy. It's just like these dirt pyramids, and they're
yeah,
they're huge. They take forever to walk up,
yeah,
but
yeah,
and
and you
then
have
they've
to,
like also we're doing human sacrifices, and
yeah,
it was like a huge Indian empire around the 1400s that
right.
collapsed.
Right,
Weird.
right. It's crazy. And yeah, and those mounds too, so I I I guess I said this on other podcast, not my podcast, so I'm not totally repeating myself. So my day job, I'm a geotechnical engineer, so
Oh,
my work's about dirt mostly, right? The thing about like Cahokia or these larger mound complexes that I don't think people quite grasp is the people who made them, moving millions of pounds of dirt, had no wheel and they had no draft animals. So all of that dirt was moved by hand, purportedly.
yeah.
So you think about that in this. I think the scale of the effort to do those is not. It's not really readily understood, I guess is my point. How hard that
Yeah,
would
like
be.
you have to be like a serious civilization of some sort, you
Yeah, to
know?
move millions of pounds of dirt by hand requires like a totally different mind state than we've got. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and they weren't living like it wasn't. It'd be one thing you're building like housing for people to live in. It was something else. It had apparently ceremonial and strategic and
Right.
religious importance. So
Yeah.
it's absolutely fascinating.
How do you feel about like the theory that it was essentially like the Aztecs? Um, like it was proto-Aztecs that then migrated down. I think it's been debunked for,
Yeah.
but how do they know? I mean, it makes sense to me.
It makes sense to me too. I think I don't really I think that we're gonna learn more about this, but I think that the mound building culture is in many cases was a distinct culture than the tribes that were living there when like when it started
Yeah.
being settled by Europeans. I think
Hmm.
it happened enough time before that there are two cultures that didn't necessarily have much of anything to do with each other and may not even
Yeah.
be the descendants of them. So like I don't know. And so yeah, an Aztec connection would sort of make sense to
Right.
me. Yeah, it very well could be.
Well, then you have all the giant lore
Yeah.
that goes on. The Smithsonian supposedly covered up. Which,
Yeah.
dude, I mean, I wrote a Weird West story about the Lovelock cave giants.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
there's like firsthand like Paiute Indians like they told a story about basically like burning, these red-haired giants
Right.
and killing them in a cave. Like that had to come from somewhere,
Right, right. Well, it's interesting when you see those stories, and I don't know what happened, right? But you
Yeah.
see those stories, and it's like that. People sort of want to dismiss that, but on the other hand, like the field of anthropology and archaeology now is like making a real effort to be like, well, we need to listen to the stories of the people who lived here
Yes.
because we spent all this time ignoring them and we missed all this stuff. And that's like,
Right.
and then you go look what they're saying. They're like, yeah, we fought a war with giant red-haired giants. They're like, oh wait, never mind, that didn't happen. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, that didn't happen.
it's like, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. There's too much. I mean, it is interesting. You can read all these sort of newspaper clippings and stuff now that people have like dug up from the archives, and man,
Right.
I don't know. I mean, some of it might be hoaxes, some of it might be, stories written to sell some copies, but there's so much of it that it's hard to
I
know. Yeah.
I think there's even like firsthand accounts from Spanish explorers of, running into giants in the
I've
Americas. So
yeah.
there's a lot. I don't know what was
It's
going on.
it gets hard. It gets hard to deny. Yeah, it gets hard to deny
Yeah.
that something weird was going on here that has sort of not been incorporated into the contemporary story for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's fascinating. I think we're going to learn like a lot more about this too, because I think there's also like more continuity between the North American and South American stuff than we probably assume as well.
I think
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's also like there's all these kind of oddities. So like where I'm from, northern Michigan, up into Lake Superior, that's this huge reservoir of some of the purest copper you can find in the world,
Yes.
and they mined it all out like a couple thousand years ago, and
Yep.
people have done the math on like how much copper was mined out, and they're like, where did it all go? They can't. Nobody
Yeah.
can. It doesn't make any sense because there's not that many copper artifacts that you find, tooled copper artifacts. So I mean,
I
there's
think there
theories
were.
it got sent to the Mediterranean.
Yeah. Yes. I know. No, I know. And I would love to write like a historical fiction book, like exploring that theory. I think it was you that shared a book. It was like an old book, Lost America,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
I actually went out and like purchased. I like dug it up.
Oh,
on
did you
eBay
really?
Or something.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
cool. Yeah.
because I'm obsessed with
It's
that.
interesting. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, just like very quickly, his theory is that basically America was settled. Well, there were obviously the native tribes the way that we think of them now, but that the Viking penetration into North America was way more extensive than is often
Yeah.
given credit for. I mean, I think the scientific or whatever consensus is that some Viking settlement occurred like in Newfoundland and like isolated areas. This book makes the point that like that was way more extensive, and also there were Celtic peoples that came here as well. And he makes it like a very interesting case. I don't know what to I don't even really know how to debunk it necessarily, but one of his craziest claims, and he has some good points about it, is that I think it was some contingent of the Vikings integrated into the Iroquois, and that by the
I've
time European settlement came that we think of, the Vikings and the Iroquois had been like completely integrated into one people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally buy that. Especially if you read like the firsthand accounts of running into the Iroquois, they were huge people.
Right.
They're like 6 foot,
Right.
6 foot something, and just
Yeah.
massive. They weren't like the Algonquin Indians, weren't like. There's different Indian types.
Sure.
You know, on the continent, and so like yeah, I could totally buy that. And then also, there's a lot of talk too that like, because Christopher Columbus was Basque, I think, or
Oh, was
I
he?
think that's how you say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, or at least had like Basque connections, and I think Louis L'Amour, because he was kind of big on this question of pre-contact America, and the Basques, like there's a lot of evidence that the Basques were fishing off the coast of North America, and it was
Oh,
like
wow.
a closely held Basque secret for
Interesting.
years. And so that was kind of like Columbus Columbus knew there was land over there. It wasn't just like
Right,
it wasn't the
right.
whole like the Earth is round sort of
Yeah. Well,
thing.
that's the whole Christopher Columbus thing is another great example of how we sort of like simplify the actual historical story. It's
Right.
like, well, he's the only person who knew the Earth was round, and he went anyway, and he always thought it was actually India that he was in. And I like don't
Yeah.
I don't really buy that. Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
really make sense. I think it's hard to know, like, a lot of this stuff. It's hard to know, like, what's just interpretation, what facts are real. But like, it definitely seems to me like there was much more contact between the Americas and the rest of the world pre-Columbus
Yeah.
than we have come to think. And I don't know how extensive it was, but yeah.
Yeah, there's also that Kon-Tiki expedition. Have you heard about that? The guy in the 70s.
A little bit,
He
yeah.
like
when
he made like a real life Egyptian papyrus boat and sailed it
right,
from
right.
from Africa to America, basically.
That's
Like
such a-
prove
Yeah.
that the currents you could get there.
Yeah, that's such a wild thing to do. Like, holy shit, that sounds like so much fun. I mean, I wouldn't do it now, but that seems like that's crazy. Yeah, so there was definitely stuff going on. It's just hard to conceptualize.
It's a
things
black
anything
box.
else. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the other thing. There's so little documentation, and much of the artifacts that would be associated with it are just going to dissolve, basically. So, you're not really gonna find. Well, and that's another thing that Lost America book. He says he claims, apparently this has been quote unquote debunked, but he claims that there were a bunch of that basically the Irish or Celtics people brought metal forging technology to the Americas, like well before it is thought that any metal forging went on here. And
Yeah.
he's supposedly found some furnaces and stuff, and that all has apparently been debunked. But the one thing that he did point out that I'd never heard before, which is interesting, is that he says that earlier versions of forging created iron that would deteriorate pretty rapidly, actually. And so we think of like metal. Well, if you leave behind metal, then it'll basically last forever. And his point is like, no,
Yeah.
you could have stuff and it would be basically gone in 50 or 100 years. It would be dust. So there
That
could
makes
actually
sense.
there could actually be a lot more. There could have been a lot more of that kind of stuff than we realize.
Yeah.
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 So, anyway, America is a cool place. America is, the history is like richer and weirder and more fascinating than I think people give it credit
Yeah.
for sure. So I'm gonna kind of wind down here. I've really enjoyed this, and people definitely go subscribe to Pulp West, and buy a copy of Medicine Woman. The links will be all available in the show notes. But my sort of closing thing I like to do with new guests is I just wanted to ask you for 2 or 3 books that are out of the Frank Kidd canon, books that are important to you but maybe are a little bit under discussed.
Yeah, I would say top of that list is Louis L'Amour's first 4 Sackett books, which are kind of like his swashbucklers. It's all like pre-colonial and
Okay.
like colonial era, but yeah, those are super high on the Frank Kidd favorites and influences.
Cool.
I'd say like recently, the Maltese Falcon has just totally. I don't know. I think that book's so incredible, the way it's
Yeah.
written in like this third person objective, and it's so different, and nobody's like really re-replicated the prose style. So that's pretty high up there.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Maltese Falcon is great. Maltese Falcon's also a great film too. That's a great one to throw on. I read it years ago, but I might need to revisit that for sure. Okay, well, Frank, I guess that's kind of it. I really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit, and I think I really enjoyed that conversation. And thanks.
This was awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Have you ever heard about Willie the Weeper? Had a job as a chimney sweeper. He had the dope habit and he had his band. Listen while I tell you about a dream he had. Oh, he went down to the dope shop one Saturday night. He knew the lights would all be burning bright. Well, I guess he smoked a dozen pills or more. When he woke up, he was on a foreign shore. The Queen of Sheba was the first he met. She called him lovey-dovey and honey pet. She gave him a great big automobile with a diamond headlight and a golden wheel. Down in Honolulu, Willie fell in a trance, seeing the dusky beauties do the hula dance. His sweetie got in jail and Willie sure did shout when he got the news that she had wiggled out. He landed with a splash in the river Nile, riding on a sea-going crocodile. He winked at Cleopatra, she said, ain't he a sight? He said, how about a date for next Saturday night? He had 1,000,000 cattle and he had 1,000,000 sheep, had 1,000,000 vessels on the ocean deep, had $1,000,000 all in nickels and dimes. Well, he knew because he counted it 1,000 times. He landed in New York one evening late. He asked his sugar for an after date, started to kiss her and she started to pout when bang, bang, and the dope gave